Hi, welcome to Ecole Chocolat's Chocolate Masters Hangouts. We're so excited to be getting together and talking about chocolate. What could be better?
Hi, I'm Sarah Hartman. Welcome to our Chocolate Masters Hangouts. Today we bring together chocolate makers and chocolatiers. I want to introduce Maya Schoop-Ruttan from Chocolate Maya from California, Robbie Stout from Ritual Chocolate in Colorado, and Tisa Alnila from Pipil Tin Coco in Jakarta, Indonesia. We're having a conversation today about chocolate, and it's all about flavor. We know there are over 600 chemical compounds in the cacao beans which produce the chocolate flavors that we so much crave. And just like wine, the terroir, the fermentation, the processing methods, all impact the flavor, the final flavor of the chocolate. So for example, we can have 3 chocolate bars made from cacao beans from Ecuador, which have their similarities but can also be completely different. So let's start from the beginning. Maya, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us what are the common notes that any given chocolate will have in terms of flavor?
Yeah, so let's see. We can have floral notes, which is rose, jasmine, citrus bloom. We can have earthy notes, soil, mushroom, musky. We can have fruity, raspberry, banana, pineapple, all sorts of tropical fruit. We can have dried fruit, raisins, prunes, fig is common. And then we have the vegetative, which is tobacco, grass, hay, tea sometimes. And then we have caramel, so that's honey, butter, milk, molasses, and in pretty bad case, cheese. And then we have nutty, almond, hazelnut, peanut, walnut, yeah, all sorts of nuts. And then spicy, anise, hot pepper, black pepper, cinnamon, vanilla, coffee. Those are the natural notes. And then you can have the added artificial notes. Unfortunately, that's the, vanilla, fake flavors. When I say fake flavors, there's chocolates that add chocolate flavor to their so-called chocolate. There is added fats like coconut fats, hydrogenated oils. Those are all bad things, of course. I actually just tasted a chocolate from Mexico. I won't say the name of it. And I was sick with a cold, so I tasted it, and I thought, no, that's impossible. It can't be that bad. So I waited to be better. I got better, and I tasted it again. It tasted like straw and cheese. It was stunning. Stunning in not a very good way, but it's even tasting bad chocolate to me is interesting because of the process and where it's from. It will have some incredible notes that you would never expect out of a chocolate. So I love to try everything, good and bad.
Yeah, that's a really big variety, And as we know, cacao has a really big biodiversity. And I know that you've traveled through cacao growing regions in Mesoamerica. Can you tell us a little bit about how chocolate makers learn how to choose cacao beans to transform it into the chocolate that they want to?
Okay, so I've actually asked a few makers, how they figure this out, and some makers are fortunate to be able to go to the plantation, which is, of course, I think the ideal, to meet the farmers, check the fermentation, the drying, the type of beans with your own eyes. You can crack the bean open there and check for fermentation, if it's right or wrong. So that's the ideal condition. Not everybody can do that. So a lot of makers which I think is amazing in this business, talk to each other and share their finding, their ideas, and where to get the good beans. I think that's really wonderful. They do that. And also you can see what, someone who is very well known and has a very good reputation, what they're using, then you can, have that for an example where to get your beans, and it's a good source, the process is done correctly. So it's pretty much, when I go to the farmer's market and I get some good tomatoes, I'm going to tell my sisters, hey, you should go see this vendor. He's got the best tomatoes right now, and she goes and get it. And that's what's happening with the beans too. They share their experience and watch each other and know that if someone really good has this type of bean, that it's a good one to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in terms of beans and genetics, we hear a lot about the Criollo diversity, the genetic, and we also know that that's kind of a tool, a marketing tool that we're using and we're hearing a lot about, which can be the bean can be a potential for a good chocolate, but it's not necessarily a guarantee, right? We have very few true trees left in the world, and we've tried good chocolates made with the Criollo bean, but also bad chocolates made with some Criollo beans. Robbie, can you tell us a little bit about how the genetic type impacts the flavor of the chocolate?
Well, I guess the best example is to think of it like wine. I mean, there's a lot of, you might have a grape that you like. So let's say you're a Cabernet person. You might lean towards that type of grape, but then when it comes down to it, there's plenty of bad Cabernets out there. I mean, it's the same thing with Pinot Noir and all these different varieties. And so sometimes, what it really comes down to is the region, the producer, and terroir, and all these things. And the genetics is really just a starting point. If you have really great genetics, you have more potential, arguably. But then again, like you look at maybe Acason's Brazil bar, that's made with, he puts it right on the front, he says Forastero. And that's not typically something that people would want to advertise because it's just sort of considered this bulk bean. But it's a great bar, it's a great piece of chocolate, and that sort of goes to show that with the right care, the right production, you can start with a supposedly lower grade cacao and come up with something great. Genetics they definitely play a big part. I mean, on a chemical level, I mean, you're going to have, with different genetics from the very beginning, you're going to have either more tannins or less tannins. And you're going to have just some kind of small chemical attributes that are just totally unique to that bean. And so if that's your starting point, you're going to get a less bitter chocolate from, say, a lighter colored bean that has fewer of those tannins. But then it's all up to fermentation and things like that to have a good chocolate. So so genetics are important, but it's not the end-all be-all attribute of a good chocolate. So.
And how does the chocolate maker figure out which bean to use to produce the chocolate that they want with such a variety?
Yeah, well, there are very few sources where they can legitimately sell a single type of cacao, like a single variety. Our Madagascar chocolate, our Costa Rican, these in the Belize, these are all chocolates made with essentially blends of genetics. And so really it sort of comes down to, like, if the genetics can't be isolated, what blend works well. We've started to pick up on what we're calling like a Trinitario flavor. we get that out of the Belize, out of the Costa Rica, and it's good. You know, it's more interesting than, you know, maybe like a bulk bean from Africa, and it has some white beans and some dark beans, and it has a nice, just, you know, round flavor. But you know, for our Balao Ecuador bar, we were really excited about that one because of the potential of working with some Nacional variety, and that was a notable difference. I mean, it's the first time I've tried, you know, a chocolate that different from everything else we've made. You know, it just didn't have the acidity that you find in a lot of the Trinitario and so-called Criollo. It was very low acid chocolate. All of the beans are dark, and you get this like honeycomb flavor, which is totally, I mean, you know, it's this sort of reputable Nacional flavor. You know, that isn't always the case from Ecuador. It's not always the case for a so-called Nacional bean, and even our version of it, you know, maybe isn't the sort of quintessential Nacional flavor, but it's closer to it, and yeah, it's an exciting one. So.
Okay, Tisa, let me bring you in on the conversation. Can regional differences or the terroir itself help us identify a flavor that we want and that we like for both the chocolate maker, the chocolatier, and the consumer as well, I guess?
Right. So the regional differences certainly help us identify a flavor note we like, I think. Although there's no valid scientific evidence that link between the terroir and the flavor of cocoa in certain region, but by intuition we can really differentiate the flavor of chocolate based on its origin. So like we do here in Pipiltin Cocoa, so for now we are sourcing the beans from Tabanan, Bali and Pidijaya, Aceh. We will soon launch the cocoa made from Kiro bean from Jember. The bean from the Tabanan, Bali has a fruity note to it, the berries, like berries to be exact, but there's also a tobacco and a cinnamon note. As for the beans from Pidijaya, Aceh, you get a long-lasting finish of roasted nuts with hints of nutmeg and earthy notes. So it's in Indonesia, both in Indonesia, but have a really different flavors.
So is there, in terms of grouping together different areas of the world, can we say that a Southeast Asian bean, what is the difference of that with a South American bean or a Madagascar bean or a West African bean? Is there some, can we categorize it that way?
I think we really cannot generalize the flavor of chocolate based on its country of origin, but rather we may identify it by the specific region. Like what I mentioned about Tabanan and Pidijaya chocolate, they are both cacao from Indonesia, but has a completely different flavor. Distance between Bali and Aceh is about 3,500 kilo, and they're in different islands. So basically, it may contribute to the difference of flavor. And one plantation has completely different flavor with other plantation, of course, even it's within the same country. So I think it's also really depends on the bean varieties and the post-harvest methods, like Robbie said. So different post-harvest methods, like the fermentation period, can result in completely different flavor. As for our experience, the first batch cocoa beans that came from Tabanan has no cheese flavor note, but the fourth batch came with a cheesy note. So it turned out that the fermentation process for the fourth batch took longer time. High fermentation leads to a cheesy flavor that came from the cocoa. So I contacted the farmer, and he finally explained that the fermentation process took longer for the first batch because of the temperature. The temperature is not it's too cold, so it needs longer fermentation process. But then again, the flavor is it's kind of it results in different flavor. So
So not
really
only
depends on
Yeah, so not only the region, but also the post-harvesting process. So
Right.
you're saying that you've been able to contact the farmers. Have you? So this would be a question for both you and Robbie. Do you work directly with the farmers who supply you to achieve a good fermentation? To work together with them to be able to better it?
Yeah, yeah. For us, we work directly with the farmers. So we came there for before the opening of our store. We come to the Tabanan Valley to see the fermentation process, and we give notes to the farmers that we want this process to be completed. And but then again, the monitoring issue. So we cannot monitor every 2 weeks there. So yeah, the consistency of the product is the main issue for us. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
When you say it was too cold, do you know how cold? Is it because it's high altitude, or how cold is too cold? Do you know?
To be specific, no, I don't really.
Do you have an idea?
Maybe I don't think it's because yeah, in Bali it's I don't think there's a high differences. Maybe the wind is they have a cold wind in one night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, to just go back a little with the terroir question, I think the way I look at terroir sometimes is not just environmental differences, but cultural differences that impart certain flavors on a cacao. So like before now, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you had these cultures processing cacao and doing it the way that they figured out how to do, or maybe they had a few tips on how to do one part of it and then they figured out the rest. So over time, you find different areas doing it differently, and that becomes a style for the whole region, and then that becomes a flavor for the region. So that's something to think about. But in terms of working on fermentation directly with our growers, we focus on what we are good at, and that is making chocolate. And we try to let the farms we work with focus on what they're good at, which is growing cacao, fermentation, drying. And really, we don't typically, if an origin isn't pretty good when we try samples, we won't take it. So we usually start working with farms that already have good fermentation.
Okay.
And so, really, what we can do is we can try to offer feedback, in which we do sometimes. So, if we notice something, we can say, well, think about trying this. Is tasting maybe a little under-fermented? We can do a cut test and just look at fermentation levels. We can assess, to our own understanding, and we can offer some feedback. And I think over time, if other chocolate makers offer the same feedback, then it'll start to sort of add up, and they'll think about trying these things. But with Palau, Ecuador, they have one farm, but they are selling 3 to 5 different flavors from that farm, and that all has to do with fermentation. And so we can try each of those. We can figure out what we like, and then we can buy different quantities of each of these and do our own in-house blending of these flavors to produce our own unique flavor. And I think just through our purchasing actions, they can see which fermentation levels are good, like what kind of things work out well. But yeah, if we see a problem, if we notice something, we can offer advice. But I'm not going to call Bertil Akiston and say you need to change your fermentation, because it's pretty good. He has it figured out. So. Yeah.
So in terms of consumers, there's no way for us to know whether it has been badly fermented, apart from the fact that maybe it has an odd flavor. What would be some flavor notes that indicated a under-fermented or badly fermented bean?
Well, yeah. So there's there's a whole range of flavors that can tell you different things. I'm just going to go back to the first one that Anna and I tried a long time ago, and it scarred our taste buds and memory, and we know what it tastes like now. And it's this terrible barnyard flavor, which was the result of really wet drying conditions. So what happened is they fermented, and then they were trying to dry the beans, but they just were taking too long to dry. So they started to develop, some just, I think probably some molds, probably some just sort of, it was like manure and just bad flavor, there's no way to describe it other than barnyard, just like this heaping mass of like manure and hay. And anyway, it was, and now it's kind of amazing, like, once you try something like that, it really like scars your memory. It's in there somewhere. It's filed away. So even if we taste the slightest amount in another chocolate or in some other beans, it's just a big red flag. I mean, it's just like, whoa, barnyard, like it's there. Like, stay far away. And that's more of an over-fermentation issue. You have things like under-fermentation. So like the raw cacao bean is very high in tannins typically. It's purple, it's just this really astringent substance. And through fermentation and through chemical changes and enzymatic reactions, these tannins begin to disassemble and break down. But if you make chocolate with very under-fermented cacao, you'll have a flavor that's very, very astringent. It sort of attacks your mouth in kind of just sort of an unpleasant way. I mean, it's hard to describe a flavor like it, but you don't want it in your mouth. It's very, makes you want to squint a little bit, and that's something that you can pick up as just a consumer if it's just downright, astringent, which you'll find with some raw chocolates out there. Just has this sort of, puckering flavor to it.
Yeah, it's the sort of flavor that instinctively you don't appreciate.
Which this is cacao's evolutionary technique to propagate. I mean, the pulp is really tasty, it's nice and sweet, and if you're like a monkey or something in the woods or in the forest and you bite into a seed and it tastes horrible, you spit it out and you learn never to bite it again.
Yeah.
But then we figured out that through fermentation and roasting, you can reduce those tannins to a level that are really actually pleasant. So,
so far we've talked about the cacao and the cacao farmers. Let's move to the chocolate makers and the manufacturing process inside the factory. So we know that there are two processes that are very important to develop the flavors of chocolate that we want. So we have the roasting and the conching. And during these, you can enhance the flavors that you want in your chocolate and also help reduce the unwanted flavors. So Robbie, can you again tell us a little bit about roasting and how it develops these flavors?
Sure. Yeah. So with with roasting, it depends on the bean. We sometimes say that like Anna's coming. With roasting, the worse the bean, like a really bad Forastero or something that's not very pleasant, you're going to have to do a lot more flavor development in the roast. That's where you're going to actually develop nice flavors. The better the quality of the cacao, the less flavor development we say that you have to do during the roast. But during roasting, what we're doing is we're removing moisture, taking it down from 6 or 7% to a much smaller amount, making it nice and dry, making the shell puff up so it's easier to winnow. But in doing that, you're also evaporating the volatile acids. So like there's a lot of acetic acid usually produced in fermentation. If it's not dried properly, a lot of that will be trapped in there, and you have to get it out. And so it's this combined, process of removing unpleasant flavors and developing the ones that are nice. And depending on the origin you're working with, the cacao, you can lose those really nice subtle flavors that you're after if you take it too far, or if you don't develop it enough, or if you leave too much of these other acids in the cacao, then you might not be able to taste like the floral notes. And so, it's just a heavier roast, you can start to do some caramelization and produce some sweeter flavors. But otherwise, it's very dependent on the variety and the source and the fermentation, and so.
And how about the conching? What is it that it does, and how does it impact the flavor?
Well, conching, it's a less of a flavor development step than maybe is reported. I mean, it's absolutely essential for an excellent chocolate. But while you're during roasting is your only chance to reach high temperatures. Temperatures at which you actually break down tannins around 200 degrees and higher. And you can actually start to reduce those flavors some more. But in conching, just by definition, conching is the agitation and heating of a liquid chocolate usually it's over a few days. I mean, most of our chocolate is conched for 3 full days, and that's overnight. I think the modern definition includes a lot of refining, but we try to finish all of our refining before we conch. And in conching, by splashing it around like this, you're providing the chocolate with a lot of surface area and heat, which is going to evaporate any moisture that could be in there. But it's also going to evaporate volatile acids that may have been left over from the roast, but you're able to get those acids out without continuing to burn the bean. So, if you do a lighter roast, you might have some negative acids still in there, but you still have a chance to get rid of them in the conching process. So, and really, the conching is it's a lot of different things happening at once. I mean, for flavor, if that's what we're talking about today, that's where you get your sort of perfect chocolate. You can just finely tune how much acid you leave in and how much acid you get out. So.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the ingredients in making chocolate now. Maya, I'm going to go back to you. We always run across people who are using cocoa percentage as a determining factor in the selection of the chocolate. So basically thinking that a higher cocoa content literally means a better, more flavorful chocolate. Can you explain to us why that isn't so?
So I think first the misunderstanding about this, it's the health issue. I have a lot of people coming to the shop and say they want the higher percentage because they think it's better tasting and health-wise, but I think the health-wise is why they think it's tastier. And it's not so. It's, again, going back to what we said before, it's the origin of the cocoa, the way it's been made, the fermentation, the drying, and then the maker, and then the ingredients. I mean, that is the key, to have, I believe, just 2 ingredients, the cocoa mass and the sugar. And so those 2 are keys. If you add other ingredients, then it's to me, it's like makeup on a beautiful woman. Why would she put makeup on if everything underneath is beautiful? So you got your beautiful chocolate. Why would you, unless there's something wrong with it, why would you put all this stuff in there? So that's where the quality of good chocolate comes from, not the percentage. You can have a 50% that is just beautiful.
So the percentage really only means the level of sweetness, right? So how much sugar.
Yes.
If we're using those 2, the sugar and the cocoa, then that's...
Yeah, if you're only using sugar and the cocoa mass, then the percentage is 70% cocoa and then 30% sugar. The problem is some people add, I'm not sure if it's a problem, I'm not too crazy about it, is when they add cocoa butter to the cocoa mass. So then, to me, it's a problem because the percentage gets a little bit tweaked around, and we don't really, as a consumer, we won't know how much percentage of cocoa butter is being put in there. So I hope one day this will be labeled and fixed. That I think it would be nice to know. I can taste it when there is more cocoa butter. They put it in there to make it smoother, and on your tongue you can feel it, you know. But I think it takes away some of the flavor.
Okay, so let's talk about both the sugar and the cocoa butter. Right now, today in the market, there are so many different types of sugar. There's brown sugar, light brown, dark brown, stevia, powdered stevia, the raw, normal white sugar. Have you seen chocolate makers begin to experiment with different types of sugars? And this can be to a question to all of you. And if so, which types of sugars are they using? Or sweeteners, I guess, would be the better word.
Well, I guess I'll start. You know, we use a evaporated cane juice, so it's a sugar, which has a little bit of the residual cane flavor, and we choose to use that for the most part because it's truly a vegan sugar. You know, some of the issues with a lot of the non-organic and the sort of mass-produced, well, very mass-produced refined white sugar is that it can often be processed with animal bone. So we try to just keep it simple and buy what we know is vegan, fair trade, organic. But in terms of what you're after is just sucrose. You want the simplest sugar you can find, because if you're buying like a single origin cacao, you don't want your sugar to add too much flavor to the chocolate, because then it can be a little bit confusing for the consumer where particular flavors are coming from. Is it coming from the sugar or is it coming from the cacao? But in terms of using like honey or agave or maple syrup or any of these liquid sugars, that would be pretty against a lot of the sort of principles of making chocolate. In chocolate, we want to keep water as far away as possible. We're trying to reduce the amount of water in our chocolate as much as possible. We're doing that through roasting, doing that through conching, but also just how we keep the factory, keeping it like a low humidity level. We're lucky here in Colorado. We don't have to worry about humidity and in that getting into the chocolate. But I'll just share quickly a story from Steve DeVries when he tried to make a agave batch. So this is just cacao and agave, and when it came time to conch, the agave started to evaporate the moisture and just became incredibly sticky. And so in this conch, we have a granite bed, like real granite, not a composite. This is granite from the earth, and a granite roller rolling back and forth. And the agave became so sticky that it started to actually pluck. It just started to just tear apart the granite. It started to pull out particles of the granite.
Wow.
To the point where there was granite in the chocolate, so the chocolate was unusable. And now you have what's supposed to be a perfectly smooth surface, a very kind of rough surface with all of the crystals plucked out of it. So that's, we probably won't try making chocolate with agave anytime soon.
Probably not.
But I think Maya can probably tell you a little bit about, where you can use it in doing chocolatier work, ganache or fillings. That's a different story, really. I don't know, or not.
I've tried to use honey.
Oh.
We try to add honey. Other than the separation of from honey from the chocolate, the flavor it also interrupts the flavor. So it's the honey aromas it's overpowering the original chocolate flavor. So it's awful. You just can taste the honey, and there's no original flavor of the chocolate came out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're using white sugar now.
Now we're using white sugar.
So going back to also what Maya was saying, the cocoa butter, there are a lot of premium chocolate manufacturers who add a higher cocoa butter ratio. for a variety of reasons. Do you guys see a trend towards increasing this ratio or decreasing this ratio? What is your stand on your chocolate for this? Tisa?
I guess there's a trend away from adding extra cocoa butter because most artisan chocolate makers feel the need of promoting the purity of the single origin and also to stay true to the percentage as we discussed before. So yeah, it's more and more a trend away from adding extra cocoa.
Okay.
Yeah, we I wouldn't say that we are anti-cocoa butter here at Ritual Chocolate. We don't add cocoa butter to anything yet, although if we were to do, like an inclusion bar, like where we're adding, coffee or something, which we're actually going to do next month,
Nice.
we're adding cocoa butter to that because, we're adding more solids, and so to balance your solids, you have to have fats. But in terms of like, our single origin line, no cocoa butter there. But I think where the real issue chocolate makers run into is, you start small as a small company, and you do everything by hand. And let's say you have a Madagascar or a Palau. These are both very low cocoa butter origins, and so when we make chocolate out of it, it's very thick. And so when we try to mold it, we can stand there, hold the mold, and sort of beat it against the table and vibrate it and force the chocolate to sit into the mold properly. But that's a very difficult task to ask a machine to do. So if you're a big company and you're trying to, automate, and you have a machine that just injects chocolate into the mold, if that chocolate is just incredibly thick, just the way that these machines vibrate will have a very difficult time getting the chocolate to sit into the mold properly unless a lot of cocoa butter is added. And then you can, that's a functional purpose, but then you can also look at just the style. I mean, if let's say, we have our American style chocolate, which is don't add cocoa butter, really bold flavor, pretty high percentage. But let's say we wanted to do like a French style, like a more European style, we could do that. We could sell a European style chocolate bar and put it on the label, because some people really like the creamy texture and the flavor. So.
Well, you should keep it American, and then the ones who want European will buy European.
Yeah, it's true.
We have to keep that beautiful American style.
Yeah. So how did because extracting cocoa butter is pretty costly, and for a small chocolate maker, it's quite ineffective. So how do you choose what cocoa butter to use? And do you have the option of extracting it yourself, Robbie?
Oh, we don't. There are ways to do it. You could stick a bucket of chocolate into a hot room and just let it sit for a while, and you'll have a layer of cocoa butter on the top. But that isn't really an efficient way to do it. And I think the real sin is taking premium, highest quality cacao that has incredible flavor, and then stripping it of its components. So like taking, let's say, a Madagascar, pressing the fat out, and then just using the fat for chocolate. I mean, these are very, very special beans. You want to keep all the flavor in there and showcase it that way. And so if we were to make our own cocoa butter, I wouldn't feel very good about extracting the fat from the fine flavor beans. It would be more of like a bulk bean that doesn't have great flavor. But then I don't really want to do that either. So it's sort of like this tricky thing that we haven't really figured out, or we haven't decided what we want to do. And then you can talk about like, well, if you're adding African cocoa butter to this Madagascar or this Ecuador chocolate, is it still a single origin? Because
I think that's a big problem, because you can get a really good bean, and then you go get some. No offense, you can get cocoa butter from Java. A few years ago, it was cheap to get cocoa butter from Java, So I know a lot of makers would have a bar from Madagascar, and then the cocoa butter was from Java. So there goes your origin right there. But of course, the consumer has no way to know that.
Yeah, yeah, those are really good points, and something that we'll probably have to move towards in the chocolate industry, right? Like you were saying, Maya. Yeah.
Yeah, something. But then again, you don't want to use beans from a flavor like you don't want to take Chihuahua beans, strip the cocoa butter out, and just re-add the cocoa butter to that chocolate, Chihuahua chocolate, because you're trying to stay single origin. Because then it's just sort of like this waste of flavor, really. So I don't have an answer.
Well, I think one cool thing about cocoa butter is when you add it to a 100%. You know, some people don't want sugar, so I think that's pretty nice to do that. You know, you can eat 100% without choking, or you know, if it's a good deal.
Right.
I think we had a good 100% in Ecuador, Sarah. If you remember.
Yeah, we did. We had a delicious 100% in Ecuador. So we're running out of time, but we've talked a lot about genetics and terroir and processing, fermentation, roasting, conching, and the ingredients. And with all these different elements to consider, it can be quite difficult to decide which chocolate bar to buy. So how do you, and this is a question for each one of you, how do you determine which chocolate bar to buy? And if we as consumers were to start with one great tasting chocolate bar, which one would you recommend and why? So Tisa, why don't you start?
Okay, so for me, the flavor and tasting is more of a preference, right? What do you like and what do you prefer? So for me, for my suggestion, if you want to buy a chocolate bar, the first thing to do is to look at the ingredients. Whether there's a in Indonesia, especially, we are behind of European and the States because we are not educated about the real chocolate and compounds. So in Jakarta and in Pipito Cocoa, we have difficulties in educating and informing people that we only produce real chocolate because in the market there are compounds. So that's not talking about cocoa butter. Even they mix the chocolate with the vegetable oil.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so we have a week, once a week, blind chocolate tasting. So we like militantly educating people to see the difference between a real chocolate and compound. So yeah, the first thing to do is to look at the ingredients, and the second you have to taste it, you have to break it, you have to smell it, and you can really incorporate the flavor from the chocolate.
Okay. And what chocolate would you recommend that we start with?
What do you mean, sorry?
Maybe a chocolate bar that you like, something that if we were to start tasting right now, somebody who's watching, with one great tasting bar, is there one that you would recommend?
I see. I will recommend or which when you taste the bar, you can really just really sorry, it's on 1 a.m. I have to think really what I'm
okay.
You can the flavor just came out from your nose, so that's the first thing. The first thing to recognize whether it's a good bar or not. Yeah, the original flavor of the chocolate just comes out from your nose. You can really smell the flavor of the chocolate.
Okay. Nice. Thank you. Robbie?
Yeah. Well, I like what she said about looking at the ingredients first. I mean, that will tell you a lot about the chocolate. If it's if it's a long list, it's probably not a very good chocolate. And I think I wouldn't just run to your nearest grocery store and buy a bar of chocolate that has an origin written on it, because that doesn't always tell you a lot. Sometimes that's a very small percentage from that origin added to a bulk bean from, let's say, Ghana or Ivory Coast. So I would try to find something that says like, craft chocolate or bean to bar or something that sort of screams small batch and or fine chocolate, and definitely talks about origin and look at the ingredients. If it's just two ingredients, cacao and sugar, then it's most likely from a producer who cares about what they're trying to do. And I mean, cocoa butter is okay too. There's a lot of good chocolate out there with added cocoa butter. But if I were you or a customer, I would definitely start with one of our chocolate bars, that Ritual Chocolate. And I'm not going to point anyone to just one bar, just because really I think the most enjoyment comes from trying bars side by side. So I would go buy one of each of our bars. No, I'm just kidding. One of each of anybody's bars. It doesn't matter. And try some of the Costa Rican, try some Madagascar, try some Palau, some Belize, and just see the difference there. That's where I think you can have your eureka moment of drinking the chocolate Kool-Aid of this is what single origin is all about. You have this whole multitude of flavors that's just coming from genetics, fermentation, terroir, and our version of that cacao. So that's my answer.
Nice. And Maya?
So, wow, they said everything there. So I'm left with a plug-in for Chocolate Maya. You come to Chocolate Maya, and I will guide you. But I think a really great way to start is look at the ingredients, of course, and then to buy maybe a few bars from one country, let's say Madagascar, So you get a bar from Madagascar, from Ritual, Dick Taylor, Patrick, or Rogue, and you taste them side by side. Same country, more or less same percentage, and you are going to be amazed that that bar from the same country will taste so different because it's made by different people. And I love that. I find that fascinating. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I would start, to go into the chocolate world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think trying all these different origins, you may find a particular region that you like best. Try it all, and then when you find what you like, stick to it. And
Okay, thank you guys so much for sharing all this wonderful knowledge. I want to close with a thank you to each one of you. So Robbie Stout from Ritual Chocolate in Colorado, Maya Schoop-Ruttan from Chocolate Maya in California, and Tisa Alnila from Pipiltin Cocoa in Indonesia. And really late over there. She joined us. It's after midnight already. Right. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day and joining in on the conversation. We wish you a lot of success in the upcoming holiday season. And thanks for watching. And I'm definitely going to go get myself some chocolate and investigate all those flavors. Yeah. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.